Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. This is a podcast to inspire, uplift, show forth the love of God, and help usher in the spiritual awakening. Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. I'm your host, Jay Spillers, and I just wanted to have a discussion about what's going on in the world in terms of the Middle East and the world at large. We have a lot of conflict going on, and is World War III around the corner? Is Armageddon around the corner? And when you start to look at like the near-death experience, you can go on like Kevin Williams' page about, I think it's NDE.com or something, or near-death-experience.com, and you start to read what most near-death experiencers say the future holds when they talk about it. And it seems to be basically like a pattern that there's these times of troubles, economic and military and all these kind of things, these natural disasters, followed by a time of peace. And many of them talk about like World War III coming and how devastating it'll be and all of that. And then you have these times of troubles, and then you have a time of great peace and so forth. And the pattern invariably seems to follow like what you get in the Bible, when you start to look at the book of Revelation and other prophetic books, Daniel, Ezekiel, and whatnot. You get essentially the time of tribulation with great wars and pestilence and everything, followed by a time of peace. And sometimes the peace can either be the millennial reign of Christ, the 1,000-year reign, and or the new heaven and the new earth. And you can get into different eschatological views from the Bible, how people interpret these things, but it tends to seem to follow the biblical pattern of times of trouble with war, followed by peace. And obviously, when we talk about like the near death experience, most of them have said that all of the predictions are not set in stone. They're seeing into the future, the trajectory. If things don't really change, this is what will happen. But it's possible that the things could not happen, that we could change our ways and move in a different direction. It's also possible that these things will happen, but to some extent, if we start getting ourselves together to some degree, we can sort of mitigate it. It might be World War III, but it might not be as bad. So, take that for what it's worth. And of course, there's different biblical understandings about how the tribulation is understood in times of trouble and whatnot. But, what we see in the world right now, what's going on in Israel and Gaza, and I'm going to try to not, make judgments about this nation or that nation or which one's right or which one's wrong. I'll make some general statements, but, I'm going to try not to get too political in that sense or, you know, too biased. But what do we see happening right now in Israel and Gaza? Obviously, the Israelis were attacked by terrorism, and there was kidnappings and there was brutal murders and things like that, and it was really bad. And then, of course, Israel responded, went into Gaza, and started, you know, significantly bombing and whatnot, and thousands of civilians are being killed, innocent people and whatnot. And there's questions about proportionality and things like that. And I have certain opinions of these things, but you can check that out for yourself and decide. And I would say go to different news sources because sometimes you get on the mainstream media, you get a certain point of view that's pushed upon you. And there's different views out there that you might want to check out. You might want to look at some of the shows like Democracy Now! Is a good one. Jimmy Dores has some good stuff. Dr. Turley has some good stuff. You know, Obviously, like if you watch Democracy Now! And Jimmy Dores, it's definitely more pro-Palestinian and more negative towards Israel. Steve Turley tries to be a little more balanced. He doesn't really criticize Israel, but he doesn't really condemn them. His perspective is more of keep the US out so we don't escalate things. We don't want the war to escalate. So he's kind of going in the same direction to some extent as the other two, but maybe not as maybe not as strongly. He's trying to keep it more non-interventionist by the US. So, but they give interesting perspectives. Um, I've seen so many things like Russia has said that they will side with Iran and that they might send troops into Gaza. That's a possibility. I've even heard North Korea may give nuclear weapons to Gaza. And then, of course, Israel has nuclear weapons. And of course, the US is coming in saying if Iran or, you know, some of its allies like Hezbollah and Lebanon and whatnot get involved, they'll get involved. And then you have the Mid East that's saying they might get involved in different ways. Some of them are severing ties with Israel. And
Have you ever wondered whether the Bible was compatible with a near death experience? In my book, Heaven's Truth, the parallels between the Bible and the near death experience, your faith will be strengthened while you support this channel. In Heaven's Truth, you will learn about near death experiences and other similar experiences in the Bible. Support for the Bible contained in NDEs, a central theme that runs through both the Bible and NDEs, how the NDE brings the Bible to life for these modern times, evidence for both the Bible and the NDE, and much more. Great book. Spillers does an excellent job weaving the relationship between NDEs and the scriptures. 5 stars on Amazon, available on Amazon.
so you start to see a lot of things going on here. And if the US gets involved and Russia and China get involved on the other side, you essentially have three superpowers that are involved, which could be literally devastating for the world, which is not good. And you have a lot of the progress that Israel made, in terms of establishing better relations with its Arab neighbors, kind of just being flushed down the toilet, with all of what's going on. And um, the one thing that sort of gives me hope is you have all these nuclear powers like Russia, China, US, Israel, and some other countries that are getting involved. Possibly Iran has them too. We don't know. And that looks really bad because, you start throwing nukes in the equation, and that could be millions upon billions of lost lives, which is really not good. But there's one glimmer of hope that I see in the near death experience. For most of the ones I've read in terms of World War III, they don't believe there's going to be a nuclear war as part of it, which at least that's some good news. The loss of life may not be as great as if it went nuclear. So, it could still get pretty bad, though. There still could be millions of people killed even in a conventional war. So it's not something we really want. It's interesting when you look at Israel, because I came come from a Christian background where Israel was highly revered and the Jewish people had to come back into their land and always be pro-Israel and all of that. And, that's their homeland. And that was a perspective I was kind of raised in. And I think there's one point that might help a lot of people in this conflict is don't conflate the government of Israel, the state of Israel, with the nation and people of Israel. See, I believe that the Jewish people have a right to have their own homeland. I believe every people, all peoples have a right to have their own homeland. The Palestinians, the Kurds, other groups, and sometimes being able to establish their own homeland is good in the sense that people that are discriminated against and ill-treated have a safe place that they can congregate into and make their own. And they can have their own customs, cultures, and traditions within their homeland. So I don't see a problem with a homeland for the Jewish people or anyone else, as long as they don't harm other people, as long as they don't treat minorities in their nations as second class or harm others. I don't really have a problem with it. I think it's fine. There may be some of that going on, unfortunately, and that does happen with ethno states or ethno homelands. But in theory, there's nothing really wrong with it, you know. But I think that's a good point to keep in mind that, separate out the people from the state. I can love the Jewish people, can love the nation of Israel without necessarily having to endorse what the government of Israel is doing. It's the same thing with the Palestinians. I can love Palestinian people. I can say they have a right to their homeland, but I don't necessarily have to endorse the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian government, which is controlled by Hamas. So, like if you look at the protests for Palestine, try to see a difference that just because someone is protesting for the rights of the Palestinian people doesn't necessarily meaning that they're protesting in favor of Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, the government that governs Palestine. Just keep that in mind. And the other's true for people that are looking at Israel and the Jewish people, that, doesn't necessarily mean you have to support the government. And we can see that even in our own context. I'm an American. I love the American people. I love our values. I love our traditions. But I certainly don't necessarily agree with or endorse everything the US government does. And that's a good example. And you could do it for any people. I love Chinese people. I love Chinese culture. I think the Chinese people should be able to have their own nation and homeland. And that certainly doesn't mean I endorse the government of China, the state of China, you know. So that's an important distinction to be made. And I think in terms of where does war have its place at this point? I think historically, there's been a place for wars in the past. You know, some of them have been justified, like World War II, when we took down Hitler and the Nazis. That was a good thing. And so sometimes there is a place for war, but is there a place for war today? And that's an interesting question because there was a near death experiencer I heard on an interview, and I don't know where I heard him say it, but he said, at this state we're in now, there's no place for war. There's no reason for war. And that was Mellon Thomas Benedict. So if a near death experiencer is seeing from God or the creator that there's really no reason for war at this point in time, why is there war? Well, that's probably kind of obvious. It's because certain elite powers within different governments want more power, they want the money, they want the control. And that's pretty much across the board, you know. It could be true in the US, it could be true in Russia, it could be true in China, it could be true in Israel, it could be true in Iran. There's money to be made, there's power, there's control to be had, and they're all kind of collectively guilty to some extent or another and have those kind of motives. There may be other motives as well. So when you think of wars, I think we kind of need to sort of put the mindset of one side in the war wears the white cowboy hats and the other side wears the black cowboy hats. One side is all good, one side's all evil. Because I think, especially in the world as we have it now, that isn't really true. Everything's a shade of gray, and sometimes it's a pretty darn dark shade of gray, but it's all a shade of gray. Nobody's pure and white, and nobody's necessarily all black. But, so that's an interesting perspective to keep in mind. And I think what we need to do is rather than trying to get bogged down in who's right, who's wrong, who's more right, or who's more wrong, we need to be agents of love and agents of peace. And that's the meditation I'm going to do is on peace. That I don't support going in militarily either direction, that as much as we can, we should seek to be promoting peace, promoting love, promoting compassion, and move away from the idea of passing a lot of judgment or passing a lot of blame, because we we can get so bogged down in that. And you look at historically, there was watching a video of Truman on, I think it was Jimmy Dore's show, and he was saying this was back in the 40s when Israel was first set up, and he was kind of just laying it straight. He's saying, yes, there was Palestinians and Arabs that wanted to push all the Jews out. They didn't want them there at all. But the other side is true too. The Jews wanted their homeland, but they wanted all the others pushed out. So you can find that element in both parties, that both sides, you know, want each other pushed out. But that view is not necessarily held by everyone in those groups. So not all Jewish people in Israel want to push all the Palestinians out. Not all Palestinian people want to push all the Jews out. But there's an element within each of these two groups that have had that view or do have that view. But that's just something to keep in mind, and it's like we need to sort of move beyond that and move into a place of love and compassion. How can we live together with greater compassion? How can we share the world that we have, whether it's in the Middle East or in our community or wherever? And peace starts with having peace within yourself as an individual, and then having peace within your family and peace within your community, peace within your nation, and then seeking to expand out peace to the world. And that's kind of really where I am. I don't have any interest in promoting war or promoting military intervention of any type anywhere. My focus is on greater peace, greater love, greater compassion. And I think that's really the message of the near death experience. I think it's the message of where we're supposed to be in terms of Christ in the New Testament. And I think that's invariably where we're going. There's a lot of people that want us to be there, because we talk about there's a spiritual awakening going on. And the people that are spiritually attuned want nothing to do with warfare and violence and fighting. They want the peace. They don't want wars. They don't want terrorism. They don't want, um, rioting and violence of every sort in every direction. And they don't want to play the blame game. This group's bad. This group's good. They don't want any of that stuff. They want a more peaceful world. They want a more loving world. They want to create a different world. They want to create a different paradigm from what we've been operating under for literally decades, centuries, and millennia. We got to do something different if we want something different in the world. You can't keep the same paradigms that you had 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and when we had this war and that war, and expect the world to change, because it just isn't going to happen. We've got to change our own mindset, and we've got to help move others in a different, more positive direction. That's all I want to say. And go ahead and check out the meditation that follows. Thank you. Relax. Get comfortable. Close your eyes. We're going to start with a few deep breaths. Breathe in through your nose. Hold. Exhale through your mouth. Let's take our first breath. Breathe in deeply. And exhale. This next breath, breathe in peace. Exhale all hostility and resentment. Breathe in peace again. With this exhale, release all stress and anxiety. This next breath, see like a white light going in, and see it bringing in love and compassion. Breathe in love and compassion. See the white light. And as you exhale, breathe out anything that's contrary to love or compassion. See it like a black smoke and breathe it out. Breathe in pure white light of love and compassion again. Breathe in. Breathe out the dark smoke of hostility and resentment. Take in one final deep breath. Breathe in deeply. And exhale. Now just imagine you're in a beautiful garden. In the midst of the garden is a beautiful stream that flows. You can see the water glistening and hear the water. It's very peaceful and beautiful. Maybe you notice in this garden that there's flowers all around you. Flowers of different types and colors. There's roses and tulips and dandelions and carnations, maybe other flowers you see. There's flowers of all different colors. And you see white flowers, yellow, red, green, purple. What are some other colors you might see? Blue. See the green grass in the garden. Feel it on your feet and on your fingers. Just imagine yourself running your fingers and your toes through the grass. How soft it feels. How velvety it feels. Notice in the garden, in the background, there's trees. Tall, majestic trees. Some of them are fruit trees. Different fruits grow on them. What are some fruits you'd like to see in the garden? Maybe an apple tree or a peach tree. What kind of fruit would you like to see? See it right now. Imagine it. Look up and see the beautiful blue sky. Maybe there's patches of white clouds all around. Take a moment to see what else you might see in this garden. Being in this garden is peaceful. It's calming and it's relaxing. Many who have crossed to the other side in a near-death experience start out or are taken to a garden. It puts them at peace, makes them feel greater tranquility. The word paradise means garden. Our paradise is like a garden within. When you read the Bible, the first place that we start at is a garden. It's paradise, it's peaceful. We need to spiritually go back to a garden, go back to our garden. Where does the garden begin? That garden of peace begins right within your soul and your being. See yourself within as like a beautiful garden. All the peace, the tranquility, calmness, the rest that you need is within your being. A garden, paradise, is within your being. It's just as Christ had said, the kingdom of God is within you. This is where we start to change the world by looking within and seeing the heaven within our own being. As you start to rest within yourself, take hold of that spiritual garden within yourself. You can then transcend out to the world, to your family, to your community, to your nation, to the people of the world. There may be a lot of war and hostility going on, but you can send forth peace and love. You can be an agent of peace and love in a troubled world. You can help others to see the garden within themselves. Maybe they didn't realize it was even there. The world changes one person at a time within. Let's say a few affirmations. I am peace, and I send forth peace. Let's say this a few times. I am peace, and I send forth peace. Say that several times in your mind slowly. I am peace, and I send forth peace. At the core of your being is love. Let's affirm right now, the core of my being is love. And the core of everyone's being is love. The core of my being and everyone's being is love. Let's affirm that right now. The core of my being is love, and everyone's being is love. Say that in your mind several times. Do one more affirmation. I am an instrument of compassion in this world. Affirm that several times. I am an instrument of compassion in this world. Now, before we close out, allow yourself to see and experience the garden just for another moment. You're going to take this garden within you everywhere you go. And know that anytime you feel stressed or anxious, a garden of peace and tranquility is within you. Connect to it and help point others to the garden of peace and tranquility within themselves. Let's take in one final deep breath. Breathe in deeply. And exhale. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.